Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the city council on planning items. Please note that the city council rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the planning commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the city council. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the city council next month. Agendas may be found at topeka.org. For cases that require public hearings, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Public comments should be addressed solely to the chair and are limited to 4 minutes. Chris, please take roll.
Mr. Armstrong?
Here.
Mr. Freed?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Ms. Jordan?
Here.
I'm sorry. Okay, wow. Ms. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Kennard?
Here.
Ms. Lawson?
Here.
Ms. Ringler?
Here.
Mr. Warner?
Here.
Mr. Dean?
Here.
We have 8 in a quorum, and old.
Thank you, Chris. The first item on the agenda is approval of our minutes from December 17th, 2018. Are there any corrections, comments? I didn't catch anything that needed to be corrected. Anybody else? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Chris, will you please take roll?
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Abstain.
Mr. Kennard?
Abstain.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 with 2 abstaining.
All right, and this being our first meeting of 2019, we need to hold elections. Is that true?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is true.
Okay.
Yes, this is our new year. We do. We are, in front of you, you have 2 sort of voting cards. Should we need to do that, what we have, one for the chair, one for the vice chair. You know, typically we try to have a 2-year rotation for the chair, but it's totally up to the chair and the nomination process. So unless there's any questions, what we need to do is just open up the floor for any nominations for chair first. And not to put you on the spot, but are you in the room? And if you aren't,
I'm very happy to continue
Okay.
as chair. That is perfectly satisfactory for me.
with that said, are there anybody want to make a nomination for chair?
I would nominate Katrina to continue on a second term as chair of this body.
Second that.
Anyone else?
Are there any other nominations anybody wants to make? Okay. Seeing none, let's just move before we go to that next step. Let's also then see if there are any nominations for vice chair. Mr. Commissioner Armstrong is our current vice chair. I assume you would also want to continue in that capacity without putting you on the
No,
spot.
I would, and if I'm correct, I think Wiley and I were both co-vice chairs
Okay.
So,
for the year.
I stand corrected.
I've already served up as the chair. I think would be just fine with Brian. I'm always here if neither is available.
So do we have a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Brian Armstrong to serve as the vice chairperson.
a second.
Second. Commissioner Armstrong is nominated for vice chair. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, to make this official, can you please fill out your vote? And just pass those around, if you could, for the vice chair and the chair. And we will make it official once we receive them. All right, we have a unanimous vote for the chair and the vice chair as nominated, so we congratulate again Ms. Ringler and Mr. Armstrong. Thank you again for serving.
We appreciate it.
And then we don't have to shuffle any chairs tonight, so that's even better. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda tonight then is the declaration of conflict of interest or ex parte communications by members of the commission or staff. Is there anything to declare?
Yeah, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest with respect to the first item on Great Life North Topeka, as I'm a member of that club.
Okay. Are there any others? Are you going to recuse yourself during the?
Yes.
Any others? All right, hearing none. We will proceed to the public hearing portion of our agenda. The first item on that agenda is CU 1905, Great Life North Topeka Great Play. And Mr. Nunabel?
Yes, good
Or
evening.
Mr. Finer, do you need to say?
So we'll just
Wait
pause a
till she
second.
says, yeah,
I'll
sorry.
go back and close the door.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Yes, case CU 1904, submitted by Great Life North Topeka, is for conditional use permit for recreation outdoor type 2 facilities. The subject property comprises 7.4 acres located at 1936 Northwest Tyler Street, which was the site of the former North Topeka YMCA. The approval of the conditional use permit is recommended will provide for construction and operation of 3 outdoor recreation facilities comprised of a paintball course, an obstacle course, each to be located on an existing baseball diamond, along with a disc foot golf course on an adjacent vacant area. Such recreational activities are categorized as outdoor recreation type 2, requiring the CUP within the R1 district. Surrounding areas to the north, south, and west are comprised of single-family residential uses, while to the east is the Soldier Creek Trail adjacent to Soldier Creek with light industrial and C4 commercial uses located beyond the creek adjacent to Northwest Topeka Boulevard. In regard to applicable development standards and guidelines, no new structures are proposed as part of the subject CUP. Any permanent structures in the future will be subject to the city's permitting requirements, including adherence to density and dimensional standards of the R1 zoning district. In regard to off-street parking, at 103 parking spaces, the existing parking satisfies the city's requirements for the activities in and outside of the building. In regard to landscaping, the proposed activities will require landscaping in buffer yards, and a landscape plan has been submitted in demonstrating adherence to these requirements. In regard to outdoor lighting, lighting of outdoor fields will utilize the existing lighting poles and fixtures, with field lights utilized only when the courses are in use during regular hours of operation. A statement of operations for each of the 3 activities has been submitted. Key points are as follows. Hours of operations for all facilities shall be Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., Friday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. Regard to the paintball facility, no more than 20% participants at any time. No more than 40 tournaments or special events will be held annually. And noise level of paintball equipment shall be limited to no more than 50 decibels at 10 feet from muzzle of paintball gun. The obstacle course will also have no more than 20 participants at any time and no more than 10 tournaments or special events annually. The disc golf course will have no more than 36 participants at any time. The applicant did conduct a neighborhood information meeting as required on January 29th. There was one attendee who owns a residence immediately to the north seeking information on the project, including use of field lights and times of usage. In considering an application for a conditional use permit, the Planning Commission shall consider standards in Topeka Municipal Code Section 18.245. These include the conformance of the proposed use to the comprehensive plan, the character of the neighborhood, the zoning and uses of nearby properties, and the extent to which the approval of the application would detrimentally affect nearby properties. In particular, the proposed outdoor recreational activities are similar to the outdoor activities that have existed on the site for many years. In addition, buffer areas existing along all sides of the subject property to reduce potential impacts of noise, obstacle courses from the paintball course, obstacle course, and disc golf facility. Open space as part of the residential PUD located adjacent to the north provides an additional significant buffer. There are trees and other vegetation along the south side of the property, and the Soldier Creek Trail and Soldier Creek are located to the east. These factors, in addition to the project conditions requiring adequate setback and screening, should certainly mitigate any potential impacts. Planning staff recommend approval of the proposal subject to conditions, including the one conditioned amendment with the supplemental memo to you from the planning director. In particular, this involves condition 4. Staff is proposing that the CUP site plan number 7 be revised to indicate the following. Appropriate fencing, fabric, or other materials at least 6 feet in height shall be installed to substantially screen views from adjacent single-family residences of structures and objects within the paintball course. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Is there any questions or discussion by the commission? At this time, we will open up the public hearing if the owner or representative of the owner will approach.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mark Boyd with SBB Engineering. We're here representing the owner, Mr. Farrant. We're good with the conditions that were set out with the, I guess, the amended number 4 condition. And I'm just here, I think staff summed it up really well for what's being proposed, so we're just here for any questions. And the owner, of course, is here if you have any questions specific to the operation.
Are there any questions?
I do have one. It says it's open till midnight on Sunday, is that right?
Yes. Well, there's a limit. That's the limit. Whether or not it'll actually be open then, but that's what he's proposing, correct?
Any other questions at this point?
Thank you.
We would now be open to anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to this agenda item.
I just have a real quick question that I can say from up there.
Just come up and please state your name for the record.
My name's Samuel Riley. I have a question about this thing because of the general noise ordinance rule. The city has seemed to be cracking down on that lately over the last year, and there's no decimal level on that rule. Because something simple as somebody mowing their yard, if one neighbor doesn't like the sound of the mower, they can get in trouble for it, and they can get cited for it.
Okay, so as relates to this agenda item, your
I'm just,
question is?
yeah, the
That's
question on the
conditions.
general noise ordinance, because, I mean, the neighbors around here, once it starts getting noisy every day and every night, somebody's liable to call in and somebody's going to get cited. The owner of the business will get cited for general noise ordinance rule.
Does staff have anything to offer to that?
Within their statement of operations, it does indicate that noise level of paintball equipment, for example, shall be limited to no more than 50 decibels at 10 feet from the muzzle of a paintball gun, which staff has determined is a minimal impact, should be on adjacent properties.
Okay. So,
Because my thing is the way that the general noise ordinance rule is written, is there's no decimal level on it right now.
so my understanding is that someone can file a complaint,
Yeah.
whether there's an actual,
You are correct. I've gotten 3 complaints for noise violation over the last year.
okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Okay. We will close the public hearing then. Other questions, comments, discussion from the commission?
I don't really have any, just other than, I mean, it looks like a good reuse of a facility of the same intent. Hopefully it gives people in that area something cool to do and get outside, so seems to make sense to me.
Any other comment?
I would agree with Mr. Armstrong. It's consistent with the proposed conditional use permit for recreational activities like it has been. So I'm in favor of it.
I agree as well. Anyone else? Is there a motion?
Based on the findings and analysis of the staff report, I move to recommend approval to the governing body of the conditional use permit CU 19-05, subject to conditions in the staff report.
I would second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And staff report includes the condition for a
Revised
memo.
condition? Okay. So there has been a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? All right, Chris?
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Ringwood?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson abstains. Mr. Kennard?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
And Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 with 1 abstaining.
Thank you. We'll wait for Commissioner Lawson to retake her seat, and then we will move on. Welcome back. Next on our agenda is item CU 1904, which is an AT&T wireless tower at Southeast 29th Street. Mr. Nunavut.
Yes, Commissioners, this is one of 3 applications that we'll be looking at this evening from AT&T for wireless communications tower in 3 locations, of course. The subject property is located at 2446 Southeast 29th Street. The entire property comprises 3 acres, with the leased portion of the subject property proposed for the monopole, which will be 130 feet in height, will be located on a leased area 3,600 square feet in size. The subject property does include a single-family residence along with several outbuildings of various sizes. Property is located on the north side of Southeast 29th Street, approximately 300 feet west of the I-470 Turnpike, with the proposed communications tower being sited on the northeast corner of the L-shaped parcel adjacent to actually the southern portion of Dornwood Park. Surrounding areas are zoned R1, single-family residential, except for a .7 acre property to the east, zoned O and I2, office and institutional. The proposed tower does comply with all of the city's development standards and guidelines. A landscape plan pursuant to the TMC 18.235 is required, and although it has not yet been submitted, it is a recommended condition of approval. The subject property does have quite a bit of mature landscaping on it in the form of mature trees and shrubs. In considering an application for conditional use permit, again, the Planning Commission must make findings and conclusions with respect to Topeka Municipal Code Section 18.245, the conformance of the proposed use to the comprehensive plan and planning policies. The comprehensive plan does not include specific guidelines for placement of towers within residential neighborhoods, but the request is considered to be in conformance to the comprehensive plan in as much as that the underlying residential zoning designation does accommodate such towers. In regard to character of the neighborhood, in particular with the southern portion of Dornwood Park to the north and east of the subject site, along with separation distance of approximately 350 feet between the proposed communications tower and the nearest off-site residence located on Southeast 28 Terrace. The proposed monopole tower location mitigates many aesthetic impacts associated with the presence of such a facility within a residential neighborhood. This is substantiated by viewshed analysis utilizing 3-view photo simulations with and without the presence of the tower as provided by the applicant. The request is consistent with the zoning uses of nearby properties. In regard to the extent to which approval of the application would detrimentally affect nearby properties, the relative remoteness of the proposed tower to surrounding properties minimizes impacts on the residential character of the area. In regard to the extent to which the proposed use would create excessive air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, or other environmental harm, both federal law and state law prohibit cities from regulating the placement of personal wireless services facilities such as cell towers on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions or perceived alleged environmental effects of radio frequency emissions or exposure. State law also precludes cities from imposing environmental tests, sampling, or monitoring. Based upon the findings and analysis, staff recommend approval subject to the project conditions, including the revised condition submitted to you in the supplemental memo from the planning director. This has to do with adding a new note to the CUP site plan to indicate that if exterior lighting is utilized, it shall be limited to security requirements of ground level equipment only and shall be installed at a height not to exceed 9 feet above the surrounding grade and shall adhere to all exterior lighting standards of the city of Topeka. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. If the applicant or the applicant's representative would like to speak.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Clockey, and I'm with Network Real Estate out of St. Louis, and forgive me, my voice is going, so just bear with me. We represent AT&T Wireless. As John said, this particular application is going to be a 130-foot monopole tower. Our FAA findings find that it will have no lights on it at all. It doesn't need to be lit. We're going to have a 60-foot by 60-foot leased area that will be fenced with a vinyl fence that has a texture to it. So no guy wires will come off this tower, and everything that goes with this tower will stay inside that 60-foot by 60-foot area. There will be an access road built to it from what is it, 29th Street, is it? From there, it comes off of the property owner's driveway to the tower itself. That's really all I have to add to it, if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Is the property occupied?
Yes.
I have a question just about these towers in general. What's the expected lifespan of these towers?
An expected lifespan? Oh, the lease on these towers go probably 50 years. An expected lifespan of the tower is probably beyond 70 to 80 years. I mean, they are constantly doing maintenance of these towers to keep them updated and maintained, painted, and taken care of.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
At this time, if there's anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to this agenda item, you can come forward. Thank you.
My name's Rosie Prawl, and I live in this neighborhood, and I'm with the NIA for this neighborhood. We do not want to see this tower put there. Right now, there are not enough studies that have been done on the results of the 5G to know what kind of effects it's going to have on our health. We have people in this area who already have cancer, who do not need these rays coming off of it. They tell us that it'll be just fine, but there's not been enough studies on it to really tell us that that's true. I would only ask, would you all like it in your backyard? That's all I have. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this agenda item?
Good evening, my name is Roy Bynum. I live in the neighborhood also. When we had this meeting the first time at the address, there was questions that were brought up about what kind of empirical studies were done in regards to the emissions. We were promised at that time that that information would be sent to us via email. I never did get it, or neither anybody else. One of the things I am concerned about is what's this going to cost us in the long run, as far as whether my house is going to be depreciated because of this tower, and the likelihood of why was this not placed over in Dornwood Park if they did not want it? Why should it be put into a neighborhood? If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this agenda item?
My name's William E. Miller Jr., and I live directly west of the tower. I'm the only house facing east, so when I get up in the morning to watch the sunrise, I got that tower right in my bay window. And the same goes for the moonrise. I've talked to several real estate agents, and they say it is going to affect the value of my house by about 20%. And the county's got my house valued at, let me look here. Oh, I didn't write that. Anyway, the county's, I'm going to lose about $24,000 in value of my house, which is about $434,100. The county's going to lose every year in taxes. There's been no peer review of the 5G effects of these towers. In fact, 1,800 scientists throughout the world have suggested that they not be built and put into use. The people in this area won't get anything out of the tower because they're focusing their beam down the turnpike to get, so the people traveling can have the 5G
And the main idea is so that they won't miss any of their turns and they won't stop in the city to go and spend any money here. They're just trying to get them out of the area faster, so the city's not going to get any money there. The only good thing out of this tower is AT&T is going to make money and the property owner is going to make money. The people of Highland Park isn't going to be getting anything out of this. I'm also worried about the health effects of the 5G. It's been shown to cause damage to the eyes, severe swelling, skin damage, immune system damage, disruption of the metabolic system, disruption of the neurologic system, leak of blood to the brain barrier, damage to sperm, increased risk of cancers, collapse of insect populations. That's the food source for bats and birds. Raised bacterial resistance and bacterial shifts, damage to plants and trees. With Dornwood Park, that's a pretty diverse area for nature, and we see a lot of animals there. I've got 35 different kinds of birds come to my yard. The first thing we're going to lose is our falcons and our hawks. The city and the planning commission has continually ignored this part of town, and it's continually going down in its health, kind of like Central Topeka, and it's kind of what you people are doing to us. You're wanting to pull us into this neighborhood. I've rehabbed 8 houses in the neighborhood, brought them back up to code, and sold them to people as single-family housing and not rental units. And I can't afford to keep doing this in a neighborhood where the city seems to be dragging us down every chance they get. I'm just urging the Planning Commission to reject this proposal and ask AT&T to find a better site for it. It's not the right site.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this agenda item?
Good evening. My name is Griselda Mora, and we live within 200 feet of where this tower is going to be built. And all I ask from you is, when making a decision tonight, ask yourselves if this is something you would like in your neighborhood. If you have children and you're concerned with their well-being, ask yourselves if this is something that you believe is safe to be close to them. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this agenda item?
My name's Sam Riley, as I said earlier. I would say reject it due to the environmental and the health risk that people are going to get off of this tower. I know there's 30 or 40 deer that run through Dornwood Park every year, and by having that tower, they're going to leave. So I know a lot of people go back there and take pictures of the deer and the natural habitat and everything else, and once the tower's up, they'll lose that.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, Mr. Armstrong.
Question for Mr. Nunnebuck. Could you clarify item 9 out of your staff analysis regarding air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, and environmental harm?
Yes, both federal law and state law prohibit cities from regulating the placement of wireless service facilities such as cell towers. We're informed of this by our city attorney. And indeed, the state law also precludes cities from imposing environmental tests, sampling, or monitoring.
Thank you.
So do all the commissioners understand that? Basically, the federal government and the state government does not allow city governments to restrict the placement of these kind of towers based on health or environmental concerns. Does that make sense? Okay. So we're looking at strictly the planning and zoning criteria when we're looking at these cases. Are there other questions, comments, discussion points? Mr. Armstrong?
I have one more question, possibly for the owner's representative, as to the service area of this tower.
Yes, I can address the service area of a tower. Towers are designed to provide service in a circular fashion. They don't shoot in one direction. So this particular tower will cover a circular area of about 3 miles around, mile and a half in all directions. That way they get the most coverage for the height of the tower.
Does that begin at the tower base out, or is there a certain range past it?
It begins at the tower, the top of the tower out. It starts at there and it goes out. And then it diminishes as it goes out.
Does it go straight down then?
No, it does not go straight down, it goes
Goes
out.
at an
What
angle.
what it's designed to do is to talk to the towers that it sees from there. That's really what it's designed to do. So you're getting handed off all the time when you're driving.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion amongst the commissioners?
Sir?
The public hearing is closed at this point. So we're just trying to process the information we have.
That's different information than he gave us at the public meeting.
Madam Chair, I do have one question. We had, I believe, Mr. Binos indicated that they were told the information would be sent to them on a study and had not received it. Do you know anything about that, Mr. Nunaville?
You know, thank you, Commissioner Kanar, for mentioning that meeting, and I was remiss in not discussing the neighborhood information meeting, and I should have made mention of that. Let me just do that real quickly first, please. The neighborhood information meeting was conducted by the applicant, and 9 persons did attend the meeting. It was conducted on January 24th. 9 persons did attend the meeting, and much of their concerns were related to health impacts, potential health impacts on nearby residents. And yes, as is always the case in neighborhood information meetings, people sign in with their contact information. And I am not aware of what came of that request. It was my understanding that the applicant was to provide that. So I subsequent to that meeting, I don't know what came of that action, or if it occurred or not.
But if I can follow that, when you're saying you're not sure whether that occurred, whether the request was made for that information or
No.
whether it was, the information was
I'm
disseminated?
sorry, I did attend the meeting, and observing the meeting, and that request was made, yes.
Madam Chair, I realize we've closed the public hearing, but I would like to hear from the representative with regard to whether that information was sent out, if it was
Yeah.
represented that they would do that.
You could definitely hear from the representative again.
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
I did email information to the city. I emailed probably 5 or 6 different studies to the city, and to there was a second meeting, or there was a subsequent meeting that I was asked to call into, but on all 3 of my meetings, I sent out information to 1 or 2 of the contacts on the email list that I had, because a lot of them I couldn't read. So I actually spoke with one woman to make sure she received it, asked them if they needed any explanation, but I did try to get it out for all 3 meetings. I had probably 4 or 5 different attachments on different studies that were done.
I know on the city website, there was some information that was provided by both the applicant and some other citizens, public members.
I did try to get it out to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a
Oh,
question?
please.
Sure. How do you go about selecting sites?
The selection process is done by a design engineer who gives us a location to where they need a tower based on the coverage needs that they have. They actually pick out the location. We give them, they give us what is called a search ring, and it's very small nowadays because the networks are pretty mature, so they're pretty specific about where they need to be. So we'll give them sometimes just one option, sometimes two, and then they come back to us and say, we need to be there, and that's how we pursue it.
And just to follow up on that, then there is some sort of contact made with property owners?
Yes. Yes, we do all the negotiation, lease negotiation, and we sit down and explain everything that's going on. We provide them drawings and sketches and the photo sims that you see to show them exactly what it's going to look like.
Any other questions right now? I think we're good for now.
No problem.
Yeah. Is there any other discussion, thoughts? Mr. Armstrong?
Just on a random transportation side note, I did go back and look at it is part of the CIP, talks of a Southeast Topeka interchange at this location. All of that proposed work would be south of 29th Street, tying into 29th Street further west, and really not subject to impacting the north side, so clear of any issues with that future project. I was just curious when I saw the area and went back and verified that.
Good to think about. My thoughts on this, just talking it out here, are that based on the zoning maps and the land use and growth management plan maps, this appears to be consistent with the plans that we have. Does anybody else have other thoughts?
Madam Chair, I would have the comments that, I agree with what you just stated, and you know, we've generally had two comments made to us. One set that is basically, you know, no one wants this where they're at. Probably none of us sitting up here either. That's going to be the case wherever one of these goes, for the most part. And the other are things that we can't consider. So we're precluded by the federal government from doing so. So I will be voting in favor of it. I don't necessarily love it, but I don't know that there's anything for me to vote against it.
Are there any other thoughts? Same or contrary?
Yeah, and I just concur with Mr. Kennard's comments.
I would also concur with that, and I actually personally have a tower within 400 feet of my house also, so
Okay.
I can understand the concerns, but it didn't preclude me from buying my house.
And years ago, I had a position similar to Ms. Feeney's, and when I started it, I inherited a case where our commission had denied a tower simply on the basis that they didn't like it where it was. And we spent a lot of time and money, and cost us a lot of money paying out for an inverse condemnation case. So I understand, as much as it may not be preferred, the law doesn't necessarily allow you to make those decisions.
I would say ditto. I was a city attorney in Georgia, and nobody likes these towers. It's just, yeah.
With those thoughts and comments, is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend to the governing body approval based on the findings and analysis in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion?
And that does include the additional proposed language?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Chris?
Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Canar?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
And Mr. Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is CU 1901, which is another AT&T Wireless on Fairlawn Road. Ms. Driver?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is case CU 19-1, AT&T. It's the second of the communication towers requests from here tonight. The applicants requested a conditional use permit for a communication tower. It's a 130-foot tall steel monopole structure. The property is zoned R1 Single Family Dwelling District, and it's located at 730 Southwest Fairlawn Road. The entire property that the church owns, it's the area that's hashed in red, contains 5.5 acres. The communication tower itself is on the eastern side of that property, so it would be proposed along Grand Court. The 130-foot tall monopole, as well as the associated ground equipment, contained or would be contained in a 60-foot by 60-foot lease area on the east side of the 5.5 acre property. The subject site in its entirety contains a church with numerous accessory buildings and uses, including a garage used by the church, as well as 2 single-family dwellings on the property owned by the church. Property is surrounded by R1 single-family dwelling district and uses on the north, east, and south. And on the west, it lies the church in a maintenance building for the church site. Both the tower and the accessory buildings do meet required setbacks as regulated by code section. A landscape plan is required pursuant to zoning regulations that require a visual screen along the length of adjacent properties. That landscape plan is conditional of approval. It has not yet been submitted or evaluated by staff. The applicant's representative indicated lighting is not required by the Federal Aviation Administration on top of the tower. However, as you received tonight, staff would recommend a new note be added to this site plan as well, addressing any lighting that would be at the base of the tower not to exceed 9 feet in height. The applicant conducted a neighborhood information meeting on February 27, 2019 at 7 p.m. located at the church. City staff was unable to attend that meeting because of inclement weather and pretty poor road conditions. The applicant's representative decided to conduct the meeting anyway because it had already been scheduled. There was no way to contact any of the attendees. That meeting report is attached, which I can summarize. There were approximately 20 people at that meeting. Some of their concerns were about the health effects of the tower, as well as questions about moving the tower closer to the parking lot and the church uses. Communication towers are regulated by local section, the communication tower section in the code, 18250, unless those requirements are deemed to conflict with Kansas statutes and federal law. The subject property lies in an area of the comprehensive plan that's designated urban, suburban, low-density residential. The plan does not include specific guidelines for placement of towers in residential areas. In absence of a neighborhood plan that establishes more goals and land uses on a parcel-by-parcel basis, the request is considered to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan, provided it is shifted closer to the adjoining church uses and parking lot, as the applicant has already done on the revised exhibit before you tonight. By moving that lease area further to the west, nearer the church parking lot, and directly to the north of the maintenance building. Staff believes the monopole is in character with surrounding land uses and zoning. Originally, the location of the cell tower was not in harmony with surrounding land uses since it's only sat about approximately 35 feet back from the Grand Avenue property line. It was in line with single-family dwellings along Grand. The new location of the lease area would be at least 140 feet back. The tower itself is almost 200 feet back from Grand Court. Landscaping additionally should reduce its visual impact substantially, and that is a condition of approval. As already mentioned, federal and state law prohibit cities from regulating placement of wireless facilities based on the environmental effects and effects on human health. Communication towers are seen as a basic component of public infrastructure. They're essential to delivery of telephone and wireless data, and therefore have a positive impact on the community and city at large. City staff is recommending approval of this request for a communication tower, subject to the conditions in the staff report, as well as the revised condition to number 9 about the change to the note about lighting near the base of the tower. The applicant's representative is here to take your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Driver. Are there any questions for staff?
Are the images provided showing the tower the revised location?
I provided you with both the original location of with the photo sims of the original location as well as the revised. The ones, this is a picture of the revised location. So as you can see in your packet, which should contain both locations, it's much closer to the street. This is the revised location seen from Grand Court, and that's another picture of the revised location seen from Grand Court as well.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff at this point? Okay. If the property owner or the representative would like to speak?
Hello. This location, as Annie spoke, we did have a neighborhood meeting, and we were asked to scoot the tower closer to the church, which we did. We moved everything up further. The reason we didn't do that to begin with was the property owner wanted to save that space to possibly extend his parking lot. So we tried to accommodate him, but it was further down towards the street. Once we sat down and explained to him that, you know, it was, the city wanted us to move it, and it would just look better, he agreed. So we moved everything up, stuck the tower as far as we could up towards the end of our compound, and then beyond that, everything else will be very similar to the last tower. Is going to be a 130-foot monopole. The area now, the lease area now, instead of being 60 by 60, is going to be 45 by 75, I believe. Same type of vinyl fencing. It's solid, so you won't be able to see through it.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Armstrong?
Same circular coverage area and radius of
Exactly the
service.
same, yes.
Other questions?
I have one. One of the residents suggested consideration of Landon Middle School. Is there any consideration of the school property?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. It's consideration
Of Landon Middle School property. Was there any
at the middle school property? Again, like I said before, we get a search ring, and these search rings are very small. I don't think we spoke with the school on this one. I think there was one other option that the engineers wanted to look at, which they ultimately declined and went with this one.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Let me call you back. The public hearing for this item is open. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
Hi, my name is Patricia Byers, and I believe I speak for the majority of people in our neighborhood regarding the AT&T tower to be placed on the property. My husband and I computed that there's approximately 25 homeowners within 200 feet. Of those 25 homeowners, we obtained signatures from 20 individuals representing 15 homeowners that all disapprove of the tower. Of the remaining 10 that we didn't get, simply they weren't home, it was during the snow. But we have heard no one that approves of this. We simply believe that it's an eyesore and we will devalue our property, which will in turn reduce our taxes. Several individuals are concerned about health risks. Even though Mr. Glock has said there are no health risks, there are several retired individuals in our neighborhood that are home all day. We also have a home daycare in the area. These people should there be any risk, are more at danger than the rest of us. I'm also concerned about the tower lighting, although they say it's not required, but what if it is? I don't want to have a red flashing light outside my bedroom window, and that's what's going to happen. I also note that Annie, driver, you put in your report, because you didn't make it, but we had to go there. We had to go to that meeting, but you didn't make it. You put in there that they're talking about putting up some trees and shrubbery. Who's going to maintain those? The church? AT&T? And when's that going to be placed there? Also, I find it interesting that the planning staff have recommended the approval of the site on Grand Court, but disapproval of the one at 5th and Taylor. They say the one at 5th and Taylor is an intensive care area, which I believe that means that they're concerned about the property values there being decreased further, which is exactly what Grand Court neighbors are concerned about. Apparently there was a Ward Mead neighborhood plan of 2010 that came into play in regarding this. We all know what beautiful homes are in Ward Mead, and we certainly wouldn't want anything to happen to them. But what about our houses? I believe a search for a suitable site should be away from any residential neighborhood. Who wants something that is approximately equal to a 10-story hotel on their neighborhood? Bottom line, the majority of the homeowners disapprove of the tower being erected on Grand Court.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
William E. Miller Jr. I just once again want to bring up the property values. In my neighborhood, there was only about 60 pieces of property homes that were going to be affected by 10 to 25% of their value. In this neighborhood, you're looking at probably closer to 100 homes are going to lose substantial value, and these people can't afford to be losing that kind of money. You need to take a look at what this tower is going to do to the people of the neighborhoods and think real hard about that. It's more than 130-foot ugly tower. We're looking at people's lives and what they've worked for and what they're going to lose over this.
Thank you. Any questions for that speaker? Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
Hi, I'm Mary Lou Weidenbach, and I live at 925 Southwest Grand Court. I'm close to 10th Street. I'm not one of the lucky people who do live close by and will have to look at the tower when they look out their front windows or sit on their front porch with their grandkids. I know the church has been good to us. That's where we have our neighborhood watch meetings.
they held that meeting on the 22nd. Most of the people within the 500-foot range got that letter on Friday afternoon, the 18th. It was dated January 8th. They got it on the 18th. We had a snowstorm that night. I would not have driven down there myself, but one of the neighbors picked me up. And when Patty mentioned the elderly, we have a number of elderly people, and that from 6th to 8th Street, or from West to 6th Street, Grand Court has ditches on both sides, so it gets really slippery when we had, that was a pretty good snowstorm that night. So we really did not get a lot of people there that probably should have been there, especially one friend who lives and will sit and watch out her window. I'm one of the 4 people who are the leaders for our neighborhood watch, and throughout the years we have fought crime in our neighborhood. We had break-ins. We got the neighbors organized and they started calling, and then we had another spate of breaking into cars and sheds and vandalizing houses and stealing mail out of mailboxes. And we worked, this happened probably 2 to 3 years ago, and we worked really hard at that, getting people notified. We just keep working. Between 6th and 10th, our neighborhood had a number of rental houses. Some of those rental houses have been bought by homeowners now who live there, carpenters who have fixed them up, remodeled them, they look really nice. 2 doors from that lot was an empty lot on which was built a cornerstone house. Seaman High School helped build that, and they built it in 2 pieces. And the original family is there, and she is an asset to the neighborhood. Every lot on Grand Court, which runs from 6th to 10th Street, is residential, single-family, and every one of those lots except that one has a single-family home on it. And I know the church has recommended moving it further up the hill. I appreciate that, but still, people are going to have that view in front of them, and their homes are going to drop in value. We all know that. Everybody here knows that. I had another point, but it seems to have lost. I don't know what the right answer should be to this, but our city and all of us should consider families. Our population is stagnant. Every time a new business opens, another one closes. The only people who seem to be making money are the developers. Thank you. I guess
Is there
that's
any
the limit.
questions for the speaker? Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
Good evening, Planning Commission, Planning Committee. My name is Dawn Downing. I'm actually the president of Ward Meet NIA. And on behalf of what we are looking at, the cell towers, I just urge you guys to hear the people that live in these neighborhoods with these towers, that you guys really actually listen to what we want. We have to live there. We understand that no one wants it in their neighborhood. I understand that. We would much rather see them on the highways or whatever, but especially when you're in a struggling neighborhood, trying to build your neighborhood back up, we do not want these towers in there. We haven't gotten enough information. We didn't have enough information, so we didn't have enough questions. We didn't know what to ask because we weren't informed. So I just, again, urge you guys to listen to the people who have asked you guys not to put these towers here. It is what we want. We don't want them there. And it's not only because they're an eyesight, it is health. We understand that you guys cannot judge on the health, but they're an eyesore. They're bringing down our property value. They have already spoke on all the topics that are important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Hello, my name is Jim Simons, and I live at 704 Southwest Randolph, but I own the property that's part of their church, I guess, or they bought it. They bought everything around me but my little lot. And I've been informed by my real estate agent that my property value is gonna go way down, not way down, but it's gonna go down. It's gonna affect it. Plus, it's gonna be an eyesore. And I bought that, I said, nah, my wife and I bought that property at January 13, 1969. The church didn't own very much here then. They got to gobble up everything around me. But anyway, we're certainly against it. And most of the neighbors I talk to are certainly against it. In fact, I haven't talked to anybody in that neighborhood that's for it. I don't know a lot of people there because I don't live there, but I'm out there in the garden all summer long. And people go by and we wave at each other. That's how I know them. They know me and they know the old truck I drive. And anyway, I just want you to know I'm strictly against it. Strictly against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
My name is Susan Bausch, and I just moved to Crest Drive in November of 17. And what attracted me to the neighborhood was, I moved from out of the country, but it's residential, big lots, great neighborhood, and I have the best backyard, scenic, old rock fence. And if this tower goes up, that's what I'll be looking at from all the time I'm out in my backyard working. I got the notice. No one on Crest Drive that I spoke to got the notice, maybe because they were outside 500 feet. But I am pretty much due west of the proposed tower. And I don't know if the families that here, I haven't met them over on Grant, but the family that sits right behind me will have a view of that every time they get up. And I don't understand why a tower would be proposed in such a condensed neighborhood like that. It's single-family dwellings. And someone brought up Landon Middle School. There's some vacant property there. Why not shift the tower over there? Of course, people are going to complain, but you're not going to be in the middle of a 4-block neighborhood. I don't understand why a tower would go in a residential neighborhood. And I guess we can't ask questions, but I could repeat what everyone else has said, but you've heard it, so, thank you.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item. Commissioners, are there any questions or discussion points?
I have a question for staff. You may not be able to answer this, and the applicant may not be able to either, but were there ever any alternate locations on the church property closer to Fairlawn to place this tower?
From my understanding is no.
And I bring that up.
That the church had agreed to.
Okay. Because there's certainly, it looks like there's places that it could have been put on the church property closer to Fairlawn. And one of the things that I noticed when I drive down Fairlawn is these were put in over the last 10 years, but there are 100-foot plus high transmission power poles that dot Fairlawn every few hundred feet, and you can see the shadows of them on these aerials. But those are there, and I see them in the background of all these pictures that they've shown. So there's just a lot of high tower profiles out there right now. But so my main question was, did they look at potentially putting them closer to Fairlawn?
Yeah.
I actually forgot about those on Fairlawn, but I know the ones along 6th Street were in my mind as well. I wasn't sure how tall those were, but
Yeah, you can see from the aerial, there's one at 8th and Fairlawn, one halfway to 7th, and they're on the west side.
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is the areas that we looked at, because the church wanted to maintain or keep as much parking as they could, was the grassy area behind the parking lot. So that, like I said before, that's why he put us as far back as he did in the beginning, and we didn't go as close to the parking lot as we are now. He just wanted to maintain the ability to extend that parking lot, plus he wanted to keep his parking lot. So we did not putting it closer towards Fairlawn.
If I may, Madam Chair, again, with health concerns, state law precludes the commission from taking into consideration whether they could have moved it to another property or not. So that cannot factor into your decision-making.
I don't think we can. I'm sorry, we'll try to speak louder. Ms. Feeney was just pointing out that federal and state laws prohibit us from looking at both the environmental and health impacts as well as the possibility of it being located somewhere else. Because we're only looking at what we have in front of us, and we're looking at how that is impacted by or being an impact on the zoning and planning situation that we have in front of us. Are there any other questions for the applicant's representative at this point? Okay, thank you. Other discussion items, questions, points, thoughts? Mr. Armstrong?
I guess maybe a clarification from staff as to what puts a neighborhood on the critical list that would maybe give a different recommendation to save the health of a neighborhood versus one that's not on the list.
Commissioner Armstrong, without, we haven't heard, I assume you're talking about the next case? Or are we talking about this case?
I believe there was a comment that, yeah, the next case had critical neighborhood designations that led to recommendations not to approve versus approving in a neighborhood that wasn't in a critical health condition. Just wanted to make sure we understood those differences. And
well, I'm not sure I want to get into the next case. I don't think that's a...
We understand that. So I'm going to try to clarify. I think what I'm understanding the question to be is, why is this neighborhood not a critical neighborhood? What defines critical or not?
The health map that we're referring to would define property values, crime, housing conditions, poverty, and one other thing I'm drawing a blank on. Those are the values that are used to determine a relative health for an area. If that's the question.
yes, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Are there other questions from the commission? Discussion items?
You need to address the chair. Is the public hearing still open?
The public hearing has been closed. The commission can reopen it if we feel like it's warranted. Again, we're looking at the zoning, which the zoning is R1. It is deeply entrenched in residential neighborhood. That property does front on Fairlawn, which otherwise is commercial, but this is a conditional use permit application. Churches, schools, a lot of times are zoned R1, but have other uses. Are there thoughts about how this fits in with the plan?
Madam Chair, if I might address a question to either Ms. Driver or Mr. Fyander. I may have been remiss in not asking this the last time. Obviously, we've had people visit last time, this time, presumably on the next one as well. It was commented, we have a little more neighborhood density here. Property value effects. Do you know what happens to the county books? I know people are going to be able to find a friendly real estate agent, whether that was the intent or not, that will say it lowers values. Do we know what the percentage value is or a dollar value that does or does not end up reflected in people's property values?
Commissioner Kennard, we don't have any information one way or the other to say it does affect, it does not affect, from the Shawnee County Appraiser's Office or any appraiser of any sort.
Madam Chair, if I could offer a comment to your concern, these cell towers, a lot of people complain about property values, but the case law says that an owner's opinion is insufficient on its own. There has to be tangible evidence to be able to establish a decrease in property values. The owner's opinion is not legally relevant.
Thank you, Ms. Feeney. I kind of understood that. I just thought the information might be available to us.
Other thoughts? Question? Does anybody feel comfortable to make a motion at this point? I'm going to make a motion. I know this is going to be difficult, but I want to see how everybody plays out here. I'm going to move to recommend to the governing body approval based on findings and analysis in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Chris, would you please take the vote?
Mr. Warner?
No.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. Kennard?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
And Mr. Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-2 with none abstaining.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is CU 1903, the third AT&T Wireless at Taylor Street. Ms. Driver?
This is the last communication tower you'll hear tonight. This is a conditional use permit for a cellular telephone communication tower, 100-foot high steel monopole structure. The property is zoned M1A Limited Multiple Family Dwelling District. The properties are located at 513, 519 Southwest Taylor. That's along the east side of Taylor, between Southwest 6th and Southwest 5th Avenues. Both parcels in their entirety comprise only .37 acres. That's a little over 16,000 square feet. The 100-foot tall cellular communication tower, as well as the associated ground equipment buildings, are contained in a 75 by 75 foot lease area that contains 5,625 square feet located on the 16,000 square foot property. Both the tower and the buildings themselves do meet the setbacks as required by Code Section 18250. A landscape plan has not yet been submitted. It's condition of approval if you are to approve tonight. As indicated with the previous communication tower, staff is recommending a condition on the lighting in the event that it's approved, that lighting at the base of the tower not exceed 9 foot. The applicant also conducted a neighborhood meeting on Wednesday, February 23rd, 6 p.m., located at Brennan Mathena Funeral Home. Approximately 12 residents or nearby property owners attended the meeting. Key concerns they addressed were proximity of the 100-foot tower in the middle of their residential block, the aesthetic impact on the neighborhood in an area that's categorized as intensive care on the city's 2017 neighborhood health map, that intensive care area are basically targeted by the city for public infrastructure improvements and infill housing, as well as targeted for private investment as well. Communication towers are reviewed in accordance with 18250 unless the requirements conflict with Kansas statute and federal law. The key here is that the area lies within a residential mixed-use area in the Ward Mead Neighborhood Plan. That plan was adopted and amended in 2010. That category of residential mixed use is intended to allow the introduction of neighborhood-scaled office, institutional, and commercial extensions from 6th Avenue. However, the plan also indicates that non-residential uses should not dominate residential uses in the block. Overriding goals of the plan are to protect single-family residential land uses as the predominant and intended land use of the neighborhood, and preserve and rehabilitate existing housing stock to the greatest extent possible. The city's 2017 neighborhood health map, that's updated every 3 years, identifies this block group as intensive care. That is a rating that addresses neighborhood vital signs, including percent below the poverty level, public safety, average property values, home ownership, boarded up housing, and unsafe structures. Intensive care areas are considered those that are seriously distressed. They require immediate attention through public and private investments. The location of the cell tower on the small lots in a dense neighborhood is seen as not compatible with goals of the plan, as the proposed use limits the property's use for future infill housing, which may still be viable as the lots were previously developed as residential. The communication tower is located on only a .37 acre property right in the middle of a block surrounded by residential in a dense neighborhood, and that impact extends beyond the property itself. The request is considered not in conformance to the goals and land use policies of the neighborhood plan. The monopole in this location is out of character with surrounding land uses and zoning, particularly the presence of 2.5 one-story residences next to the property. Your lot size in the area allows very narrow single-family or multifamily residential structures on 25-foot by 155-foot wide lots. The setbacks along Taylor on the west side are approximately 30 feet, and the east side are only 6 feet. So all the houses along both the east side and the west side are very set close up to the street. The tower centered in the middle of the .37 acre property is a conspicuous presence with surrounding land uses as seen by the applicant's photo simulation taken from Taylor. There it is. The zoning lot measures 105 by 150 foot deep, is sufficient size to accommodate 2 new lots meeting current M1A standards for new infill housing. That being said, the property has been vacant since at least 2006. The close proximity of the monopole and ground equipment to surrounding properties does have an impact on residential character of the block because primarily of the density of this block. Landscaping could help to mitigate the tower's impact, but that landscape plan has not yet been evaluated by staff. A negative impact on the value of properties may potentially arise if the location on the small property makes future residential housing infeasible because the required lease area excludes other uses from developing on the property. Communication towers are essential to delivery of telephone and wireless data and providing services for emergency responders, and overall are seen as being a benefit to the public economic and have a positive economic impact on the community and the city. They're commonly seen as a common form of public infrastructure. On the other hand, the proposal does create a negative impact on the neighborhood if it discourages redevelopment of the block and it limits the ability of the subject site to be redeveloped because of the location in the center of the property. Planning staff is recommending disapproval of the proposal. In the event the commission does choose to approve the proposal, staff recommends the site plans be revised to address the following conditions. Conditions 1 through 11. Thank you. I'm open for questions you may have.
Are there any questions for staff?
My problem with these is I feel I'm restricted legally. I don't really have a lot of discretion. So what I'm trying to understand is why this is, staff has determined that this is negatively impacting or doesn't fit the character of this neighborhood, but it did fit the character of the last neighborhood. So I can kind of understand what the distinction's being made.
I think one of the issues here is the size of this property, the location of the leased area, and the middle of the property. And in other cases, the properties are significantly larger and they can be relocated in a different manner so they're not set right up next to the street and right across from properties that are only set back 6 feet from the street right-of-way line.
I have a comment. I too am struggling with this one. I will have a hard time voting no, given what we've voted on here tonight. It seems like, part of the reason is that we want to attract investors to come in and invest money in these seriously distressed neighborhoods. But we heard from some of the others tonight that that's exactly what they've done in the other neighborhoods. And I don't think it's right to withhold putting the cell tower until after you've invested. I mean, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Nobody likes these cell towers, so I'm struggling with this.
I definitely see a difference a little bit because of the size of the lot. I mean, I see what the staff is saying, but I also agree with commissioners that have spoken about the difference is small. Any other discussion or questions for staff? Would the owner or the owner's representative like to speak to this agenda item?
Yes, very briefly, this location, again, was chosen by an engineer that they look at a coverage objective. The fact that it's in a very, and my thinking is that the reason they chose this location is because it's a populated area, because people need coverage in the areas where there aren't houses, obviously, but they also need coverage where there are houses. That's the main reason it's there. So, I mean, they're trying to provide coverage to the residential area, the businesses area that's near there. So that's, that's why this location was selected. It was a location we could meet setback requirements, and, it was kind of behind the funeral home, kind of tucked in there. So that's really why this location was chosen. It will not be lit. It'll have the same type of fencing that the other two have, vinyl. And there'll be a very, very short access road coming off of the alley to this particular tower.
Any questions for the applicant at this point?
So, sir, do you know if there were any locations further north, I'm thinking about that neighborhood, that were not in quite as, have many houses around there that were looked at, that were possible?
I think we looked a little bit to the north, but again, we're driven by the engineer saying this is an objective coverage objective that I'm trying to provide, and they picked this location based on how they want the signal to be going out, so.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
That it? Thank you.
Thank you. We now open the public hearing for this agenda item. If there's anyone in the public, in the audience who'd like to speak to this item?
Don Downing again, Ward Mead NIA President, and you pretty much already heard from me on the beginning in the tower just before now. But I want to state, we are in an intensive care area. Our property values may or may not be affected, and because of you not being able to tell us the answer, whether they would be affected or not, I think that you should consider the possibilities that it may be affecting our property value. But not only that, the tower will be placed in a smaller area. I can see it right outside my back window. And as far as the communication from the AT&T and in reference to the meeting that they were having, I didn't receive mine until the day after the meeting. So, and I heard from quite a few of the neighborhood residents that they didn't receive a notice of the meeting as well. So I think the lack of communication and the fact that we don't have the whole story, we have no idea what we're getting into. And no, we don't want to see it in our backyards. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
Evening, Commissioners. Didn't plan on speaking, or I would have wore a suit coat. Came down here to watch a meeting. Hadn't watched one of these in a long time. I've watched county ones, been involved in them. So I'm seeing a different flavor here tonight.
Sir, can you state your name for the record?
Yes, Joseph Ledbetter. I'm an attorney here locally. I actually represent a client who did not inform me about this because I doubt she was notified. But she's got 3 houses in the next block. Her name is Deborah Edwards, and I think she owns 419, 423, and I think 427 Southwest Taylor. I'm not sure she was notified of this, and but I'm sitting here and I'm going, wow, as a lawyer, I ought to do some due diligence because she would definitely not approve of this. I'm going to question several things going on here tonight, and I am going to get to the plan because I'm very familiar with neighborhood plans. Since I was president of High Crest for several years, I went through several of those plans, and they were very important. And you, the body, you weren't here, but you voted on that plan. So that plan was passed by this body in 2010, the one we're discussing, which the other areas did not have, I guess. There was an NIA, but I don't know that they have a plan on each side. The footprint of this, has this land been replatted to allow such a footprint? Such a sale or such a lease? Is this an industrial use in a residential area? I forget the name of the gentleman that says he represents the owner. What's his name?
Mr. Clocky?
Mr. who?
Clocky?
Clocky.
Clocky.
In a previous hearing, he was asked if he had provided information to all of those residents. He said, well, I think I emailed something. That was not an answer. What did he mail to those people in that first hearing? I never heard it. It should be part of the record. It should have been handed out at this meeting, if nothing else, to those residents. What has not been handed out tonight? What's going to be claimed that he gave information to these neighbors that never got to? Or did it? Is there a record of it? Has it been mailed? Email is not sufficient notice. I'm sorry, but this body's got to understand that. And when somebody claims that, I think you should confront them. I know I would. I am absolutely opposed to this. My client was not notified of this, or she would have called me. I know her. You're building this on 1/3 of an acre? Are you kidding me? What is the actual footprint size of what these are supposed to be? It has to be standardized somewhere in your codes. I'm not hearing that tonight. How is landscaping going to landscape a 100-foot tower? Seriously? How will that help a 100-foot tower? Could you go back to that photo where it shows the, I guess, an artist rendering of the tower towering over 3-story houses?
Oh, the other one.
That one. I saw that. I'm sorry. I laughed. I said, my God, that looks like War of the Worlds tower coming in through a neighborhood, you know, just tearing up houses. I think this is the most ridiculous proposal of the night. Let me speak to neighborhood plans. I hope that the Planning Commission will talk about this. The neighborhood plans are very important. This area, because, in my opinion, the city has not taken care of it with code enforcement, this whole area has become intensive care. I didn't know what your time restrictions were.
Tonight was 4 minutes. Would the commission allow another minute?
I'd like at least 2 more minutes, please.
Any feeling on that way, one way or the other? All right, can we do 2 minutes, please?
I'll give you 1 minute warning.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Commissioners. The reason this neighborhood's gone down and is now intensive care is because, in my opinion, city neglect. So the plans ask for the city to start turning that around and putting infill housing in. Habitat has a house just up from this block, a brand-new 2-story house they're putting in. I wonder if they were notified, since their investment is potentially at risk by things like this. We have these neighborhood plans because we're trying to bring Topeka back up. We're trying to get people to move into this city, live in this city. I can't speak to the other 2 areas, but I was actually appalled by what was going on tonight. I have not watched one of these in a while. I think these are industrial structures in residential areas. That's what I would have attacked, and that's what I'm attacking right now. The fact that somebody needs one of these, well, we need other things too. We need water towers, we need all kinds of infrastructure, but not in residential areas. The fact that AT&T is struggling to make money is really of no concern to me. I'm more concerned about our residents. I'm much more concerned about our citizens. And I would urge you to absolutely turn this down. And I also want to make sure through the record, and I'd like that sent to me, my law office, 734 Southwest Fillmore, Topeka, Kansas. I'd like to see all the documentation was sent to my client Deborah Edwards, because I did not hear this, and I'm pretty sure she would have notified me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
How are you all doing this evening? Thank you for allowing us this time to speak in a public hearing regarding this issue. My name is Marty Hillard. I'm here on behalf of myself, my family, my neighbors, and those who find themselves in central Topeka's vicinity on a daily basis. I live at 1011 Southwest 8th Avenue. It was recently brought to my attention through the Old Town Neighborhood Improvement Association that there are plans between Bryn and Mathena Funeral Home at 800 Southwest 6th Avenue and AT&T to erect a 100-foot tall communications tower that will occupy 519 Southwest Taylor. I'm aware that that notice was given within proximity to this site. However, we know that a tower of this magnitude will have effects beyond its immediate vicinity. My wife and I moved to Old Town in 2014, eager to build relationships with our neighbors and to contribute positively to our community. In my opinion, this reflects a bigger conversation happening in the city of Topeka as it relates to Momentum 22 and the Greater Topeka Partnership. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. We're driven to advocate for those of us within walking distance of all the great things happening in downtown Topeka, knowing that its ultimate success lies in our ability to access and participate in this positive momentum. As the housing market continues to slow, an unsightly communications tower is disruptive to property values. It invites vandalism because of how much space it occupies. I'm also concerned about health problems related to long-term exposure to electromagnetic radiation. There are many schools, both public and private, that are close to where this proposed tower will be built. St. Francis Campus and Stormont Vale are within shouting distance. 6th Avenue is a major street that feeds in and out of central Topeka, as well as other major intersections and corridors. Tens of thousands of Topekans will come within this tower's location on a daily basis for an indefinite number of years. All of this seems counter to what we have committed to within our neighborhood, as well as the city's commitment to revitalizing its core and building momentum for future generations. Setting this precedent sends the wrong message to Topeka citizens, as well as multinational corporations, about what our commitment to a brighter future looks like. I'm asking that you reject the proposal. So, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? Anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item?
My name is Kevin Meyer, and you have a representative from AT&T here, and I don't believe a word he says. He'll tell you health hazard, no health hazard, property tax. Your property value won't go down. I don't believe him. If it's snowing outside and it's slick, he'll tell you you won't slip and fall. I don't believe him at all. It seems like you guys already made up your mind. Your plan is to vote everything in. Yes. He also mentioned engineers. The engineers decided this be a good area. But on one of the cases, on Grand Court, the property owner didn't want to move it closer to Fairlawn because he didn't want to interfere with his parking lot. And that's all I got to say. Any questions?
Questions for the speaker? Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this agenda item?
I've already spoken about the Grand Court area, and I feel sorry for this area that's being considered too.
Can you restate your name?
I'm Mary Lou Weidenbach.
Thank you.
925 Southwest Grand Court. The pictures are rather misleading. Have any of you driven by these areas? They look so wide and there's lots of room. It's much closer than that, especially when you're living next to it. Have any of you driven by these sites and look at them? I think that you should do that before you but you've already decided on ours. One thing that you could do would be to amend the application to make sure that it doesn't become even more unsightly, because I've seen towers where you put one tower up and pretty soon there's other communications things all over the top of it, so it really becomes really ugly. So I would recommend that you consider putting a limit on what else can be added to that pole. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this agenda item? I don't see anyone. Just want to make sure there's no one else. I don't see anyone else who'd like to speak, so I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. Discussion from the commission. I guess I do have a question about the mailings. Who sends them out, and how is it determined who they go to? Is there a standard?
Yes, for the public hearing, everybody within 200 feet of the property itself, the property boundary that's proposed, receives a notice of the public hearing. For the neighborhood information meeting, staff created a requirement that it be slightly larger than what state law requires us to legally notify people of. So that boundary is, if it's less than a 3-acre property, it's 300 feet. If it's greater than a 3-acre property, it's 500 feet. So that neighborhood notice boundary was decided on by planning department staff. The 200-foot boundary is, for the public hearing, is governed by state law.
Okay. And those notifications go out just by general U.S. mail?
The planning department, for the neighborhood meeting, the planning department provides notices to the applicant, and they are the ones who mail out notices for the neighborhood meeting. It is on them to mail out the notices for the neighborhood meeting. Okay. We have a policy that we try to have them send out the notices at least 15 days before the meeting. I think in some cases that may not have happened in this case because of the distance of the applicant from us in terms of getting the notices to him for mail out. But it is our policy to try to get the notices to them soon enough so they can mail it out. From my understanding, the applicant mailed the notices out as soon as he got them.
Any other questions, discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that with Ms. Feeney. Could we talk a little bit about the process? We know you've tried to supply them within 15 days from what you just said. How is it determined whether they send it out? What is a member of the public's right to challenge they didn't get notice? Is there no requirement that there's evidence, a certificate of service provided by the applicant that they did in fact send them out at a certain time?
No, there is nothing like that, and the neighborhood meeting is not statutory, it's just the policy of the planning department to get the neighborhood information meetings, so they operate on policy. State law requires that anyone within 200 feet of the property will be notified, but the lack of notice will not affect the validity of the decision that you make today. The fact that someone didn't receive notice will not affect your decision tonight.
A question was brought up about limiting other antenna and things on the pole. Is that even something that is possible? Is the city even have any kind of mechanism to do that?
No, again, state law doesn't allow the city to dictate what kind of equipment does or does not go on those poles.
And I would also add that we actually encourage co-location. So we would want more providers to be on one pole than to have many poles.
Is there other questions, thoughts, discussion?
Just to finish out the notice issue, if, Madam Chair, if we could have the applicant come back up and address when the notice was sent out relative to that. But I know Ms. Feeney has indicated that legally it doesn't alter our outcome, but whether or not it affects our attitude, it may have to.
So what we were provided from Annie, when we started going through this process, and as soon as we had our application in, we were provided a list of labels, of addresses. She mailed me the list and the notices on all 3 sites at the same time. The day we got them in our office, they went out that day. I don't know what day it was. I'll have to go back and look at my emails. I know I sent Annie and John an email saying they went out that day. So I can give you that date. Right now, I don't know what it was. But the day we got them, I called her and said they're going out this morning. So we all sat there, folded the letters, stuffed the envelopes, and stuck the stickers on, took them to the post office that day.
Any other question? We understand the dates. We understand. We understand. The Postal Service, we don't have any control over them either, so I know I didn't get some mail during the weather, so. When are there any other questions or discussion? This particular one, I'm sorry, sir, you're excused. This particular one did bother me more, so it's about the placement than the other two, just because of the smallness of the site. I understand what staff was getting at with that. I don't know what bearing that has on everybody else's thoughts, but anybody else have, Commissioners Lawson and Frieda have explained what their thoughts were on that. I don't know if you've had any other thoughts come up, but.
I think I struggle with voting no on this one after voting yes on the other ones also, because they're very ugly.
Yeah, no matter where you put them.
I don't disagree with that at all. Like I mentioned before, I've got 4 lots down from my house, and it's not attractive. But I also know that I have 5 cell phones in my house, my kids and wife and everything. Without this infrastructure, that wouldn't work. If you didn't have it in an area, and if you're trying to bring people in from out of town, downtown, places like that, that infrastructure would be something that would be kind of needed. I struggle with that. I don't like to see it, but there again, I do have it in my backyard, and it hasn't affected me necessarily. So.
Any thoughts? Did you guys have anything else?
I think inevitably with the inner city, you end up seeing it on a smaller plot. And I've experienced this before as a city attorney. It's just, to his point, everybody wants coverage. If you come in and you develop it, people will want coverage. You're going to end up putting it somewhere.
Someone who had to used to stand out in his driveway in snow and rain to be able to make phone calls, because there wasn't a cell tower nearby for a while. The plus and that. I'd love to be able to say no to these, because it doesn't look good. I also know that I've dealt with other cases where people thought it would destroy property values, they wouldn't like it, and it turns out they wanted to move and they sold their houses and they had no reduction in property values, so it'll vary from house to house. But and look, I understand this area and wanting to preserve it. The smaller lot size makes a difference. The reality is that folks need to be talking to Congress people and state legislators, because our hands are bound.
Right, that's right.
Because I've been on the other side where we tried to do this because the people didn't like it and we didn't like the look. And a lot of taxpayer dollars went into the pockets of the same people. They didn't want to get the money. And the tower got there anyway. So it's frustrating, but
Any other questions, thoughts, discussion? The staff has recommended disapproval, but there is language in the report that in the event that the commission approves the proposal, the staff recommends the site plans be revised to address the following conditions. There's 1 through 11. Does anyone have any thoughts about those conditions? Specifically, number 2 talks about relocating the monopole tower to the south and west, still meeting the setback. I would definitely be in support of that.
Madam Chair, also in considering the motion, we want to try and make sure we have a positive or a motion in the affirmative. So for the record, not to confuse anybody else, or, but that would help.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, a motion to approve or
That would be the-
disapprove, not to not
correct.
disapprove or something.
Yeah, motion to approve would be the preferred motion, then you can speak from that.
Okay.
Yeah, vote from that.
Are there any thoughts about the conditions that were recommended?
So in that moving south and west, that pushes it further away from Taylor?
Yes, it goes back towards the alley more and back where the power lines would be.
I might, were discussions had about having it moved before we, with the applicant, and they were not receptive to that?
Yes, that's correct. They were not receptive to moving the tower on this site.
Is it possible to know the physical limitations of why they couldn't move it?
I suppose.
Would the applicant like to address that question about the relocation on the site?
The relocation of the site, we just felt like scooting it around in that small area, the visual wasn't going to change anything, where it did on the other site. If we can meet the setbacks and scoot it, we'll look at scooting it back as long as we can comply with the setbacks we're required to do. But to move it over, that wasn't going to be moved that much, so we just felt that it was, it was good in the middle of the compound.
If I might, if the committee was deciding that that's what we wanted to see, would you prefer to see this set back a month so that you could negotiate the specific location agreed upon with city staff, as opposed to leaving it to negotiation after the fact?
We could, if you wanted to vote on it with the location in the direction you wanted it to move, as far as we can move it, as long as we can comply with the setback, we can move it. I don't know how many feet that is right now, right off the without measuring. So, yeah, if that wanted to be a part of the condition, we would be happy to move it.
Ms. Driver?
I estimated that if they moved it 30 feet to the west and 30 feet to the south, they could still meet the 50-foot fall zone from adjacent residential, the property boundary of adjacent residential property, which the only one is along the alley right-of-way to the west, since the property to the south is actually zoned commercial.
However you want to handle it, we can do it either way. If you want to vote on it being moved, we can just get it, what we'll have to do is get a new 1A, and we can just have the site plan revised.
Any other questions for the applicant right now? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Driver, on the image and the map that was provided to us, is the hatched area the required area that is that the required size of the?
Oh, you mean the setback for the
Right.
tower? The tower setback is actually from the monopole itself. The setback is measured from the monopole.
Okay, there's a square here with the hatch, the red hatch.
That's how, I kind of just estimated what the lease area would be on that aerial,
Okay,
so,
that's not the required setback.
no, that's not the required setback.
Thank you.
I know that the tower's huge, but for me, at the ground level, it's the fencing and the massing of that right up close to the street that makes it feel like it's out of scale to me. So that's why I thought pushing it back would be better. Any other thoughts, discussion?
To me, the reason I was asking about the moving it back and looking at your comment is, if it's actually moved back to the southwest, it becomes closer to the last situation we looked at in terms of view. And as I'm looking at it, trying to delineate why specifically I would vote against this, not voting against the others, it is the closeness to the street that appears to be able to be limited to some extent by moving it back. So I think if it's moved back, it's harder to come up with a specific reason to vote against it now.
The other recommended conditions appear to be pretty much the same as on the other two, as far as landscaping, signage, height of fencing. Are there any other questions or discussion, or is there anyone that would be able to make a motion?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that planning staff recommend approval of this proposal, subject to the recommendations provided by staff, with the setback referred to in 2 being to the maximum distance, and that can still comply with setbacks, and as amended by the lighting memo.
Second.
Anybody else like to discuss anything further?
If I could just clarify, so the motion is to approve, recommend approval of the CUP, subject to the conditions in the staff report?
That is correct.
Okay.
And your second was the same?
Yes.
Chris?
Mr. Armstrong,
Aye.
Mr. Freed,
Aye.
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Ms. Jordan,
No.
Mr. Canar,
Aye.
Ms. Lawson,
Aye.
Ms. Ringler,
Aye.
and Mr. Warner.
No.
Motion passes 6-2 with none abstaining.
Okay. Next on our agenda is action items, the 2020 through 2029 CIP. Mr. Warner.
Commissioners, so I'm going to talk to you about the city's capital improvement program. We do this annually in February. We do this because state statute designates that the Planning Commission should review the CIP to ensure its consistency with the comprehensive plan. So planning staff has selected certain projects within the CIP that may impact the city's land use and growth management plan or other elements of the comprehensive plan, such as our bikeways plan or transportation plan, etc. So the memo that's provided to you lists a series of CIP projects. There, in addition to that, there are project sheets that go with each of those projects. The CIP is highlighted to where those projects are in the actual CIP list, and there's a map. What's a little different about the summary this year is we include new and revised projects. So the first part of that memo talks about projects that you didn't see last year. The next section is projects that have been changed in some manner, and then kind of the standard projects that you've seen most years. So I'll talk about just a few of these. If you have questions about those or any others, please feel free to let me know. So the first one I want to talk about is Southwest Indian Hills Road. You may remember this road, the section of road between 21st and 29th came up at a recent planning commission meeting in regards to the annexation of Sherwood Village. This particular project in your memo is the last project on the list. This is titled Potential CIP Project. Good news, this project, so in the time that this went out, shortly thereafter, it was decided that this project would actually go into the CIP, would go into the 6 to 10 year CIP. So this is just letting you know it's no longer a potential CIP project. It's actually going to be in the CIP, which is something that this body considered with the annexation of Sherwood Village. Okay.
Mr. Warner, before you move on, the governing body still hasn't proceeded on a action item for that development, is that correct? They had a council hearing session, but not a voting action?
Correct. Commissioner Armstrong, actually, we're going to have that tomorrow night. It's on the agenda for consideration, so the annexation and the plat.
All right, thank you.
So the next project I want to discuss is the first project in the memo, Southwest Fairlawn Road. So this again is a new project that was not in the CIP last year. This is a project from 23rd to 29th Street. It involves rehabbing that stretch, also adding some lane width and reworking kind of the intersection and the section between 28th and 29th as part of the Wheatfield project. So this project it's in the city, so we consider that a Tier 1 project that's consistent with the comprehensive plan. The next one I want to talk about is the Montera Water Tower. So this is also in the new projects, the third one down. So the city is looking to build a new water tower in this, what they call the Montera zone. So this is the area of South Topeka, where there's some industry in that area. The issue with the existing towers, it lacks capacity, so if we get a big water user in that area, a high-profile water user, we just simply won't have enough water to supply that. So This water tower will add capacity, add storage to that area, and hopefully will help attract new businesses to that industrial park. So this benefits the employment tier of our urban growth area and also tier 1, so this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The next one I want to talk about is neighborhood infrastructure, particularly the money that goes along with our stages of resource targeting. The memo is not exactly accurate, unfortunately. So the SORT program we tweaked here recently, and we're doing a neighborhood a year now. So it used to be we did 2 neighborhoods every other year. So we're now on a schedule where we're doing 1 neighborhood per year. And Central Park is the neighborhood for 2019. We actually kick off their planning program this Thursday. So the change here is the funding has been increased from 1.4 million to 1.7 million. And this is a project that is consistent with our neighborhood element and definitely needed in these neighborhoods. The next one I want to talk about is, and the final one actually, is Southeast 29th Street KTA interchange. So this interchange project ultimately would be to construct a new interchange. This particular project is the city's share of a design concept. So we're still in the early stages here. This project was in the funding section of the CIP last year. The previous few years, it's been moved to other funding sources. So the hope here is we'll find some money some other way to pay for that design. So with that, commissioners, those are the projects I was going to highlight. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Mr. Warner?
I'm kind of curious, just with the interchange, since the turnpike's its own kind of, they raise their own funds, how's that determine if the city should pay for that or not? Is that just a shared cost, or is that, why wouldn't the turnpike cover that cost, I guess?
We don't have a, Commissioner Dean, we don't have a source identified for that yet. The turnpike would not, they were participating in a concept design that they did with the city. In this particular case, the request that comes from the locality, they would pick up that cost. So if it's an economic if it's seen as economic development, then it probably should come from a source that has economic development dollars attached to it, as opposed to, that's why it got moved out of a general obligation bond source, which really isn't. So that is, that's as much as I know.
It's more like it's requested by the city, or it's something
Right.
we want, so that, okay.
Yes, and we've gone back and they've made it pretty clear in the concept study that it wasn't going to generate enough revenue, they think, to pay for the construction. It would pay enough revenue for the ongoing operations of the toll booth and the facilities. So until we have a design, and plus there's an interchange being created which has a whole other formal level of request to federal highways and requesting an interchange break there. So there is a very specific study that needs to be done to move forward with this that is going to be borne upon the locality to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Observations? I was just looking at the map, I thought it was, there's good diversity of areas of the community, different project types. I think that's good.
Yes.
So do we need to take an action on this? I did not know. I skipped over that part.
Yes, so the action is you're determining that the CIP is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Is there any thoughts or discussion on that point?
I would make that motion.
Motion to approve that it is consistent with the
CIP
plan?
is consistent, yes.
Is there a second?
Second?
Anyone else?
Mr. Warner?
It was Mr. Warner.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second to confirm that it is consistent. Chris?
Mr. Warner?
Aye.
Ms. Ringler?
Aye.
Ms. Lawson?
Aye.
Mr. Kennard?
Aye.
Ms. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Freed?
Aye.
And Mr. Armstrong?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Communications to the commission?
Yes, Madam Chair, a couple things. One is we hopefully have notified you, there is two public meetings next week on our sign code update. That's February 26th at the Public Library. One meeting is at 1 o'clock and the second meeting is at 6 o'clock, so come as your time allows, and we will be presenting the proposed code updates as best we can. Mr. Hall, he's not here tonight, will be leading that charge. And we also have, try to get it out to the media as much as possible. We also want to get as much public there as possible, so spread the word. Second thing, you may have noticed our letterhead has changed. We are now officially the Planning and Development Department. That was approved last year by the City Council. I don't know that I've ever mentioned that, but just a point of reference, your name doesn't change. You're still just the Planning Commission, although you deal with development. But so I just want to point that out in the future. If you see that, why that happened or why that is, it won't surprise you. And then lastly, next month, we will have a meeting next month. I think it'll be mainly on the sign code. We will try and workshop this thing for you all, bring back any input we have from the public, try to get you to get your arms around this. We want to try and, you've seen pieces as it's come over time to you. We kind of want to give you the comprehensive overview of where it's at, very specific standards. We don't expect you to digest that though in 1 month, so we'll see how that goes, and then we'll just proceed from there, whether we can bring that back the following month or need more time to work on it. We'll just make that determination. You'll help us with that next month. So be ready to talk signs next month. And I think we only have one case as well, a small case. So that's all I have.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you.
Any hints on the fate of the arrow message boards?
The Messina signs?
Yeah. She's not here, but we need to.